Today's episode of Locked On MLB is brought to you by Ultimate Baseball GM. Ever dreamed of becoming a Major League Baseball general manager and managing your baseball franchise? Then this game is for you. To download the game, just visit ultimatebaseballgm.com or look it up at the App Store. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code Locked On, all caps, in the game. And now it's time for Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I'm an Emmy-nominated television producer who is about to begin his 5th season as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm on Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And on today, which is the 20th day of March, 2023, we're officially in late March. And you know what that means. Opening day is right around the corner. And you know what it means because it's a Monday. I got Mr. Baja Kaloop right over there. There he is. Introduce yourself, Millard.
Well, my name is Millard Thomas, host of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. You can follow me on Twitter for my personal account at CreatorThomas24. You can also follow the show account just by looking up on both Twitter, Instagram, Locked On Diamondbacks. And please, we're slowly approaching 400 subscribers on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. So please hit subscribe on there as well.
That's right. And we're approaching 1 billion followers at the Locked On MLB. We're several 100 million short. But I think we could bring in the Delta. Hey, we got a bunch of things to talk about. I want to address one thing right away. I'm going to try to address this as quickly under a minute. Hey, last week I acknowledged we talked a long time about the Oscars, probably a little bit too much. It happens to be an obsession of mine, and I know not everyone's a big fan. But I just, once a year, just indulge me to talk about it a little bit. The show is a lot of fun. But it did kind of remind me, I sometimes get flack for my love of the Oscars. If someone loves something and it's not harming you, don't ever pull the whole, what you like, stupid. I mean, people say that to me as a baseball fan. Someone asked me, don't you find baseball boring?
Yeah.
I said, well, I do a podcast about it all year long for over a decade, so obviously no. And just because you don't like something doesn't mean you should try to prevent someone else from liking it. There's so much crap going on in this world that's sad and depressing and divisive. When you see someone liking and having fun with something, it's not harming anyone. Let them like it. Which brings us to the World Baseball Classic.
Mm-hmm.
Look at, I'm going to full disclosure. If you listened to me 10 years ago, when the World Baseball Classic was going, I think it was the first one in 2013. It had no bigger opponent than me, mainly because Bud Selig thought of it, and Bud Selig is my kryptonite. But it also, the first couple of times they tried it, they were spring training games. That's all that there was no energy to them. And people say, when you go there, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, when I go to a Little League game, that's fun too. But I mean, I was really against it, and I was completely guilty. Excuse me, as I scratch my nose. Completely guilty of being one of those people who trashed it and poo-pooed people who try to get into it. But as Allison, the infield fly girl, was on the show, she's a big fan of the WBC, and she started turning me around on it. And I got to say, I can't claim I'm a huge WBC fan right now, but there's been some exciting baseball. There's been some good stuff happening. And do you know what? Anything that makes the sandbox of baseball bigger and more part of the world and has people enjoying going to the freaking game and watching a game, do you know what? Let them. Have fun with it. And people are having fun with it. There have been exciting games. You got the Trey Turner Grand Slam. You got the wild game, New Mexico, and it was Mexico and Venezuela the other day. You got Cuba playing the United States in a few minutes. We're recording this on Sunday. People are getting into it, and you're seeing the ratings are high. Not that I care much about ratings, but you're seeing more people are watching it, and more people are attending it, and there's more energy in it. And you know what? I'm all for anything that brings about more baseball and more people enjoying it.
Yeah, and we're, in the preseason, in the spring training season of the baseball schedule, we're actually getting to watch meaningful baseball games that actually matter to these players on a high stakes level. And the discourse just surrounding the WBC, I think some of it has some merit. I just feel like we've gone to the extremes when it comes to the discourse, when you're saying these games have no importance. Why are there any real major league players playing in these games? They are absolutely meaningless. That's where I think the discourse just goes a little bit too far, because I do think there's some merit to maybe you see like the Edwin Diaz, the Jose Altuves, right? Your star players, your $100 million plus players getting injured. There is some merit to, you know what? Do I want to send my best players to the WBC where they could potentially get hurt? I think that's a real question maybe owners and front office people and GMs will have. But at the same time, you don't look at the FIFA World Cup as like some extracurricular activity where these players get hurt, or the Olympics where, you send your basketball players and your best athletes and those guys get hurt, because there's so injuries in FIFA and there's injuries in the Olympics. And when those players get hurt, when Paul George broke his leg in the Olympic basketball a few years ago, we didn't say we need to shut down Olympic basketball and it can no longer be played because our stars are getting hurt. We said it was a one-off freak accident, freak injury, and we're going to keep playing because guess what? These players care about the pride in playing for their country, and we have the Olympics mean something to us. I think that's where we aren't at with the WBC yet. I don't think it's entered that national consciousness where everyone really cares about it on the same level of a FIFA and Olympics. And that's because the WBC is still pretty young. And it's, this is only the third WBC that they've ever had. So I think after a few more years, I think hopefully the extremes on the discourse will change, because these games do mean a lot. They want to play for the pride of their country. And it's cool to see a stacked Venezuelan lineup go against Team USA and seeing those two lineups really slug it out. So I think for the discourse surrounding the WBC has gone too far. I do think there's some merit as to whether you want to send your best players to play these games, knowing that they could be hurt, but the players want to. They want to be there. They want to compete. And isn't that what you want from your athletes in sports? Like, you want to see them compete in high stakes games on the highest level. Like, that's what the WBC is trying to do during the time of the baseball schedule when we're not getting important games, when it's just spring training. We actually get to watch playoff level baseball in March. I think that's a great time.
Look at a big difference, and I talked about this 10 years ago and I complained about it. Big difference between the World Cup and the Olympics and the WBC is those first two mean something, and they have meant something. Those roots are very deep. Yeah. Now, maybe the roots are starting to go deeper into the ground with the WBC now. And maybe it's starting, I'm never going to tell someone that they shouldn't get excited about it. I'm not going to tell the players what I don't know what it's like to play for my country. Okay. I do value Major League Baseball more than anything. And the fact of the matter is I've always felt the system that baseball has, which is they take players from all around the world to be to play on the highest level possible. Players, Ohtani, and players from the Caribbean, and players from Venezuela, and players from Australia, and players from Korea, and players from all around the United States come play Major League Baseball. It's the highest level, kind of like the Premier League, where they get people from all around the world to play soccer in Europe. But we're seeing that the players are starting to care more and more, and maybe eventually it will get to that point. The only injury I think there's any sort of merit talking about, because, people could get hurt in a spring training game. People could get hurt washing Jeff Kent's car. I think that there's the Diaz injury is the only one that I think has any merit for discussion on this, because he wouldn't be jumping up and down and celebrating a spring training game in March the way he celebrated this year. But I'll also put that in the fluke category. How many times in the history of baseball have we seen a massive injury take place during a celebration? Kendrys Morales And that's the only other one I could think of.
Yeah, it's pretty fluky. You don't see it too often. So it's like, I don't know. I think maybe there's a way where front offices could decide and maybe put in a player's contract if you want them to go play in the WBC. And if they get hurt, then it's like some injury exception where maybe you don't pay the salary. But I think it should be on a case-by-case basis and make it voluntary because, yes, there is a little merit to seeing your best players go play an extracurricular activity where they're not exactly getting paid. But also, don't you want to see your players compete at the best level? And it's a great ramp-up time. These guys are going to be off and running once the regular season comes around. They're already going to have their adrenaline spiking. And the idea of adding, we're going to talk about later, making the cases against NL teams not making the postseason. A team like the Dodgers that saw a lot of talent leave their team this year, having Mookie Betts just inserted right into your lineup after coming off this WBC run, I think he's going to be a huge spark to that Dodgers team to start the season.
Anything that gets people excited about baseball is positive. It's positive because I love baseball. If it gets people around the world more excited about it, it gets people excited about it now at this point of the year and ramps up for the season. You know what? I can't sit here and tell you that I have WBC fever, but maybe I will the next time. But I'll tell you something else. Do you know what flopped badly? What sporting event flopped badly the first few years they tried it? The Super Bowl. The Super Bowl 1. If you wanted tickets to Super Bowl 1, you would go to the LA Coliseum day of the game and say 1, please, and you'd have a ticket. Plenty of seats available. And it was considered to be a joke. The much better NFL clobbering the inferior AFL. It was considered to be it was a shrug. Do you it also was a huge flop when they tried to do it? The league championship series in baseball. The first 3 ALCSs were busts. Sweep. Only one team that lost the ALCS the first 3 attempts at it didn't get swept. And they lost in 4 because that's back when it was best of 5. And doing my research on my 72 book, the 72 postseason was the first year that the league championship series was anything other than a complete shrug. But it was a shrug. And the first few times they tried the World Baseball Classic was a shrug. But now, it's starting to get a little juice to it.
Yeah.
It's starting to get a little energy to it. And what I'm fascinated seeing by having more people interested in, and of course, maybe it isn't super huge in America. It's getting a little bit bigger, but maybe that international interest that's happening could pile into the interest of Major League Baseball and vice versa. And you know what? Anything that promotes the sport is okay by me.
Yeah, and I could see it continue to grow in popularity because I think the most important thing when you look at these big world events like the FIFA and the Olympics, I think the most important thing is what's the level of talent then you're inputting on these teams. And you look across all these WBC teams, like they're fully loaded with stars in baseball. The Venezuelan lineup, the Puerto Rican lineup, Team USA, you got legit stars up and down these rosters. And I think that's the best thing that could happen for the WBC right now. So I think this is only going to grow in popularity. Like right now, I asked my friends who work at Chase Field, it's impossible to get WBC tickets. They cannot hook me up. Those tickets go for a good amount of money. And those these Chase Field is more packed right now than once the regular season starts because the D-backs, unfortunately, are not going to get home crowds like they're getting right now for these WBC games. So people are coming out to watch these WBC games. Chase Field is full. And I think it's going to continue to grow in popularity, knowing you have lineups and rosters loaded with premier MLB stars on these lineups and rosters.
Well,